Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into one of the most chilling and, frankly, physically impossible events ever recorded on a deserted stretch of the historic Route 66. We're going to break down the exact timeline of a 32-year-old truck driver named Jake Thompson and look at how a totally routine solo drive somehow transformed into a terrifying intersection with the impossible. Imagine finding that ominous little message scrawled on the back of an old photograph. Well, that is literally the only physical evidence left behind from what can only be described as a waking nightmare. So let's reconstruct exactly how this legend unfolded step by step, using the precise details reported from that cold autumn night. Okay, let's start with Phase 1, isolation on Route 66. To really grasp the psychology of this event, we have to put ourselves in Jake's shoes. Picture this. He had been driving his rig through the freezing Arizona desert for nearly 6 hours straight. The exhaustion was definitely setting in, but the true anomaly, that began at precisely 2:13 a.m. This timestamp is absolutely crucial because it marks the exact moment his reality began to fracture, right when he spotted a woman standing on the side of the road wearing a long white dress. And we need to emphasize just how alone he was. The reports from that night explicitly outlined the absolute desolation of the highway at this specific moment. We're talking zero cars, no gas stations, no streetlights, just pitch-black darkness stretching endlessly in every direction. It sets this incredibly claustrophobic stage, right? Out there are no witnesses, and there is definitely no help. Which brings us to Phase 2, the hitchhiker at 2:13 a.m. Now, against every survival instinct telling him to just keep driving, Jake actually pulled over. And as the woman slowly approached his truck, his headlights revealed these deeply disturbing sequential details. She had her hand raised for help, and as she got closer, the physical reality became clear. She was completely barefoot, and her feet were covered in dirt and dried blood. He nervously rolls down his window to ask if she's all right, and she slowly nods, whispering that her car broke down. But notice the massive contradiction here. First off, her voice sounded weirdly distant, and second, when she pointed into the dark to show him her car, Jake couldn't see a single vehicle anywhere on that empty desert highway. All right, let's move into Phase 3, the vanishing passenger. So she asks to be taken to the next town, and Jake reluctantly unlocks the door. The literal second she sits down in the passenger seat, the ambient temperature inside the cab just plummets. It dropped so fast that Jake could suddenly see his own breath. He actually checked the dashboard. The heater was actively running on full blast, yet the air felt freezing. And for 20 minutes, they drove in total, agonizing silence. Then came this terrifying fracture in reality. Glancing at his side mirror, his heart absolutely dropped. He couldn't see her reflection. He looks directly at the passenger seat. She's sitting right there. But looking back into the mirror, the seat appeared completely empty. His hands start shaking. Was he just exhausted, playing tricks on his mind, or was something deeply, deeply wrong? Suddenly, breaking that 20-minute freezing silence, the woman finally spoke. She looked at him and asked, "Do you know what happened here?" Jake nearly jumps out of his skin. When he nervously asked what she meant, she slowly turned her head toward him and just stated, "There was an accident." As she turned to face him, Jake saw her eyes. And guys, they were completely black. There were no whites, no pupils, just pure, endless darkness. She expressionlessly repeated, "There was an accident. Years ago." Total panic sets in. Jake slams on the brakes, the truck screeches to a halt. He grabs his phone, but, of course, out there in the middle of the desert, he had zero cell signal to call for help. That escalates us right into Phase 4, the officer from 1986. Right when Jake is trapped in this absolute nightmare, a beacon of hope appears. The woman points through the windshield, and in the distance, Jake spots flashing red and blue lights. Flooded with relief, he drives toward the police car. But as he gets closer, he notices the vehicle looks incredibly old. Actually, scratch that, it was a vintage model straight out of the 1980s. Jake jumps out to get the officer's attention, but when the pale-faced cop looks inside Jake's truck, the passenger seat was empty. The woman had completely vanished. Jake is frantic, insisting to the cop that she was just there. But the officer's face turns grim. He points to a nearby cliff and lays out these highly specific, horrifying details. He says 20 years ago, A woman's car went over that exact edge. She died down there and was found wearing a white dress. And according to the officer, people say she still hitchhikes this road. Jake nervously tries to laugh it off, thinking it's a sick joke, but the officer is dead serious. And then a loud crash echoes through the night. Defying all mechanical logic, Jake's massive truck begins rolling forward all on its own. The brakes were entirely locked, the engine was completely turned off, yet the truck propels itself straight toward the cliff, disappears over the edge, and erupts into a massive fireball that lights up the desert sky. Jake's livelihood, basically his entire life, was destroyed in a matter of seconds. Which leads us to the final piece of the puzzle. Phase 5. A warning from the past. Devastated by the explosion, Jake falls to his knees. But when he looks back up to the officer for help, the man and that vintage police car were completely gone, swallowed by the dark. Then, lying right there on the desert ground, Jake finds a piece of historical evidence. It's an old weathered newspaper dated October 17, 1986. The headline read, "Highway Patrol Officer Dies Trying to Save Women in Route 66 Crash." And right below it, a photograph of the exact same officer he had just been talking to. His hands trembling, Jake realized the man had been dead for decades. Suddenly, this freezing wind sweeps across the desert, and he hears a whisper directly behind him. "Thank you for the ride." Jake slowly turns around, and there she is, the woman in the white dress, standing mere inches away. She was smiling, but it was a smile far too wide for a normal human face. And then, just like smoke in the wind, she vanished. Jake didn't hesitate for a second. He ran, and he literally didn't stop running until the sun came up. The next morning brought daylight, but absolutely zero comfort. Rescue crews searched the cliff and found the smoking wreckage of Jake's truck, but they also found something else inside that ruined passenger seat, something that shouldn't have survived the inferno. It was an old photograph, taken in 1986, of the woman in the white dress, and on the back of that photograph was that handwritten message, "See you again on Route 66. Jake Thompson never drove that stretch of highway again, and honestly, can you blame him? But the legend, it hasn't stopped. To this day, travelers on that exact desolate stretch of Route 66 still report seeing a barefoot woman in white standing beside the dark road at exactly 2:13 a.m., waiting. Which leaves us with one final chilling question to ponder. When the clock strikes 2:13 a.m. in the middle of nowhere, who is going to be her next ride?